Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome, all you citizens of the world. I'm Michael James, and it's time for another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. This one is for the week of May 23rd, and as usual, we're recording it a couple of days early. I'd like to start off with a little bit of information, some of it good, some of it not so good, regarding the ongoing war against the people of Gaza by the United States and Israel. The United Kingdom and France and Canada have all challenged Israel and talked about sanctions and taking steps if they do not let aid in and slow down this basically a massacre of people. Along with that, I found a thing that said the former Israeli prime minister has called for civic revolt against Netanyahu's government. The Times of Israel reports that former Prime Minister Ehud Barak has called for civic revolt against Netanyahu's government. Barak served from 1999 to 2001 as the prime minister, said the Israeli leader is acting impulsively like a caged animal. And in addition to that, we have ongoing war in the Ukraine, and despite attempts to get Russia to go a ceasefire, that has not happened. I think that another thing that's going on that's not so good is there's also war in South Sudan. The U.S. is trying to send people to numerous places, so-called immigrants, and they've taken away protections for 350,000 Venezuelans. And the woman, Kristi Noem's Homeland Security, doesn't know what habeas corpus is. That became clear when she was being questioned in front of a congressional delegation or congressional hearing. Habeas corpus is a fundamental legal principle that ensures individuals cannot be unlawfully detained. It allows a person to petition a court to examine the legality of their detention, and the court can order the person's release if the detention is found to be unlawful. Those are a couple things that I think are not so good, and we have to keep paying attention to. Something on another note that's been pretty good is I read in the New York Times an article this week called "An Illinois Building Was a Bird Killer. A Simple Change Made a World of Difference." All of you from Chicago know that we have lots of birds flying around here, and we have these ongoing migrations at different times of the year with thousands upon thousands of birds flying up along the lakefront. And there's been a lot of birds killed, roughly 41, almost 42,000 in the last 20, 25 years. That's down. That's since they put up like a dotted pattern on the glass at McCormick Place. They only had like 45 birds killed this past spring, and that number is down 95% from 2 years ago. This is a good thing. People taking care of other animals besides ourselves living on the planet and assuring their future. I think that'll be it for our early banter. I'm going to be right back after a short musical break with our first guest, the renowned Chicago puppeteer Rocio Chio Cabrera. And following that, our second guest later on this morning will be Todd Zaruba of Undercover Books. So stay tuned here on the left end of your dial, live from the Heartland for the week of May 23rd. We're going to have a lot of good discussion.
Esas tierras del rincón las sembré con un boipando, se me reventó el Barzon y sigue la yunta andando. Cuando llegue a media tierra, el arado iba en Enterrado se enterró hasta la telera, el timón se deshojó, el barzón se iba trozando, el yugo se iba pandeando, el sembrador no iba hablando y yo le dije al sembrador, no me hables cuando ande arando. Se me reventó el barzón y sigue la yunta andando. Sí, señor. Y todavía, amigo, todavía.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of May 23rd. And my next guest is someone who I just met today, but I heard about her about a week ago. I was at my son's engagement party, Katie and Gina, and my daughter, Koya Paz, who is involved not only at DePaul, but with the Free Street Theater. I'm always asking her to come on the show. And she said, I've been on. How about we do someone else? And she recommended Rocio Chio Cabrera. And Rocio is a puppeteer, and she works with Free Street Theater as well as putting on other productions and works with a number of groups. So we're going to find out a little bit about her and about puppeteering and how that all those go together and produce some good works. So good day to you, Rocio.
Good morning. And although this actually isn't our first time meeting, we met on set at There Is a Future last summer.
Well, I'm glad to be corrected on that. And as an old guy, my memories is slipping, but
no worries.
I go to those events.
We had a great conversation about Buffalo.
Oh, right. Oh, I do remember. Yes. Okay. Well, we'll have to edit the whole show here, Hal. Well, let's start out here. You're from Chicago, born in Chicago, and you're raised in Humboldt Park. What is puppeteering, and how did you get into it?
Thank you. So I like to say that puppeteering is animating objects so that they can tell stories. And there used to be a standard definition of puppeteering that would say that you would manipulate objects. But now the general consensus is we use the word animates because objects within them have life already. Like the likeliness of, like the object will have a likelihood of something else. And so we are just merely animating it. To what end? To tell stories, to explore what it's like to be something else. And that's what I like to say that puppetry is. But maybe I would like to add that puppetry is also the conception of these ideas. Sometimes you don't even have to build a puppet. For example, a kettle or a water bottle can be puppeteered too. So you're really just bringing in that play element, animating things for fun.
How did you get involved in this line of work? What inspired you? Who introduced you?
Yeah, I think I've always been a little artsy. I did study business in college. And then when I graduated, the pandemic hit and everyone was stuck at home anyway. And I had always, on my free time, did really intricate miniature scenes. And during the pandemic, when we were all bunkled in, I spent more time. I would make these fabricate miniature scenes, but I didn't really focus on the character. And then during the pandemic, I started to work on the characters that lived within these scenes. And I was wondering what tales they had. So I took a class in toy theater. And at the end of the class, we had a little presentation. And actually, my first class, I did a miniature toy theater piece of El Barzon. And that was 5 years ago. And now I'm working on a bigger production of El Barzon, also using puppets. But I really realized that I could tell any stories. I can play these mini games. And I was doing it with my husband, and we found it really fun. In this solitude of being enclosed in the pandemic, puppetry was so much more. You could go to other places. So I found it to be like a really like escapism.
What's the translation of El Barzon?
It means, that's a great question. It specifically refers to a pull ring inside of a yoke. So El Barzon is a piece based off a Mexican folk song. And the folk song sings about a farm worker, a campesino, who's pulling his oxen with a yoke and tilling the land. And in the song, one of the pieces of the yoke breaks. And that one piece in English, it's a pull ring. And in Spanish, it's el Barzon. And it refers to the piece that's connecting the oxen to the yoke.
And that's the play that currently the presentation, the play, I assume we can call it, that you're putting on about Mexican laborers.
Yes, that is the play that is about Mexican laborers. El Barzon it's a folk song. We don't actually know exactly when it was first written. That is the nature of folk songs. But it, as I said, it tells the story of this campesino working in the field. And he's under these really intense situations that his boss is hassling him, and has a lot of external pressures and debts. And with this little pull ring breaking, he's now under even more debt. And this reflects the modern worker experience that, they're under the yoke of capitalism and something's got to give.
Where will this be presented, this puppet show that you're doing right now?
This piece will be around a series of parks all along Chicago, mostly in the West and South Side. And it's a free show in the park. And it opens late July into early August.
Is that going to be in conjunction with Free Street Theater?
Yes, it is a production of Free Street Theater.
And what is your relationship to Free Street Theater? I understand you are the artist in residence or an artist in residence.
Yeah, I am an artist in residence currently at Free Street Theater. And Free Street Theater, to me, has been kind of there since the beginning of my theater career and my puppetry career. The first play I did with Free Street Theater was There Is a Future. And there I was an ensemble member, but I was also building puppets. And like I said, I didn't have a theater background. I studied business, and I kind of said, hey, I don't have this formal training, but I want to tell and make stories, and I want to bring this art form. And they were extremely receptive to my art form, and they really encouraged me. And since then, I've worked on more puppets with them. I'm devising this show, and I've brought in other artists to work with Free Street.
So I saw that play in some park far south, and were there actually puppet figures on sticks, and as well as people with big box heads and that kind of thing. Am I remembering correctly?
No, a little bit. We had mask work, which is not technically puppetry, but I think they're cousins to each other. But we did have a giant form monster that was meant to represent the bureaucratic forms, paperwork that crushes someone who's just trying to get a far up ahead. So we had that monster. We had another big head puppet that wasn't a mask. It was separate. And then we did have some bags of money on sticks that were eventually followed by the cast during our Follow the Money segment.
Rocio, since you've gotten into puppetry, have you discovered any previous puppetry companies or groups? The only one that comes to mind for me is the Bread and Puppet Theater, who I don't know if I ever saw them in person other than when the bus pulled up at the Heartland Cafe and they had lunch there.
That's funny. I'm familiar with them. I actually just did a project with one of the artists that he was a managing director, I believe, of Bread and Puppet for the last 10 years. But he was in this project about 3 weeks ago. We went to Seattle and we built a giant puppet for SEIU 775, which is a service union. And He brought his expertise of big puppets. I brought my arts facilitation experience, and the event was led by Flying Leap. They are based out of New York City, and they focused on youth theater, but they also have experiences with building big puppets. They actually built 2 puppets, one on either side of the Mexican-American border in Sonora, Mexico, and in Arizona. And they brought these 2 puppets to meet each other on either side of the border. So that was Flying Leap Productions. I really appreciate them. That story is what made me get involved with that project. And then here in Chicago, I've worked with the Chicago International Puppet Fest and I've actually noticed that a lot of Latino artwork is puppetry. We just don't recognize it as such. And so kind of after my experience kind of going to the National Puppetry Conference at the Eugene O'Neill Center, I realized, wow, a lot of Mexican art is puppetry, and we don't see it that way necessarily.
Do you think it's an expanding art form here?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I believe I actually genuinely believe that Chicago is the puppetry capital. Puppetry is growing. It's so tangible. And I think that now with things becoming so digital, people are coming back to working with their hands because the process of making a puppet is part of the art form. You have to get all of your friends in a room. You need many hands and you need many ideas. So I do think that puppetry in and of itself is community building. If you're building a big puppet with someone, you guys are now bonded through paper mache and glue.
Well, we're doing this recording while you're in your studio.
Yes.
And I know you have a couple of people there with you. And so while you keep talking, maybe you can move around and show us what's going on. Because as you know, this is both radio streamed and on YouTube. So people who want it can get the visuals. And I think we're going to see a couple of cows here.
Yes, these are 2 giant oxen. Here is one of them. It doesn't have a name yet, but we are actually working on making a full-size oxen. And of course, we want it to be extremely lightweight for the puppeteer. And we want only 1 puppeteer in each cow. So we are actually recreating a yoke, like a traditional old school agricultural yoke. So here is one of the masks that's empty. And then here, Senor Felix is building the second cow head. We're paper macheing it. It already has 1 layer. We're going to add about 5 layers of paper mache and then remove it from its cast like a mask. And then, we'll have to make the backpack to carry it. And we are going to make a series of puppets for this piece. Here's our vision board. We're going to make 2 oxen. We are still brainstorming on how we're going to make the boss. We had thought about making a big head, but we don't want to lose the expression of the actor. And so we were thinking about how else to show status. So then we thought about making a ridiculously long sombrero because sombreros are a status symbol in Mexico. The type of sombrero you're wearing lets you know if you are a worker, if you own an hacienda, and basically your job. So we were thinking about doing that. We also have a great puppet concept in mind. We wanted to show the power of the people in the multitude of people. So we were going to make these backpacks that had people on either side. And so here is one of our faces. This is a beautiful woman. Her sombrero is half cut off, but it's a cardboard cutout of who Adelitas are known for. Adelitas are women soldiers during the Mexican Revolution. So we have some human cutouts that we're going to make into backpacks and wear them.
Oh, this is nice. I'm really glad you're showing us this. You know, in addition to this new play regarding Mexican laborers, you also have a puppet play. I guess that's what do you call it? A puppet play?
Yeah.
One that's called Juana and the Missing Mayan book, which you do invite people to invite you to bring it to their schools, etc. Tell us a little bit about that play.
Juan and the Missing Mayan book was a great project that I did with. I did it when I was in the puppet lab from the Chicago International Theater Fest. But that play is about a little Mayan girl. She is 9 years old, and she lives in the world of the Spanish conquest, specifically 1692. And her story is about her discovering Mayan books and being at that critical age that she wants to read, but she doesn't know how to read this language because the Spaniards intentionally destroyed that knowledge. And so this play was really interesting. We basically rewrote history. In my first version
That's going on today too.
No. But I think it was in much more good faith with that story. The first version of that story I made extremely true to history. And then I made more versions of that story. I made it with a group of students who were in third grade. And they were Mexican American students. And I asked them, what did you think about the play? And they said, I wish she would have won against the Spaniards. And I wish we knew what her book said. And I kind of basically workshopped the play again with the class to say, what do you wish would have happened? And it kind of aligned with history, but it was a different tone. She doesn't understand the book still, but some books she saves. And that's true. Today, there are 4 surviving Mayan books around the world. So that was a really interesting learning experience to use puppetry as a way to show the world what we actually want.
Well, I was going to ask you about puppetry as a teaching vehicle, but you clearly have answered that. So Rocio, a.k.a. Chio, right?
Yes.
As a Mexican-American, we're living in some serious times for people's safety and just carrying out their lives. So we've got ICE running around in all kind of vehicles, grabbing people, whether they're citizens or not. You as a Mexican-American artist, can you just share with us, we got about a minute to 2 left, your advice, your observations about, what do you want to say to your fellow citizens of the world about our current situation?
That's a great question. And right now, since I'm in this world of where I'm immersed in the Mexican Revolution, I see a lot of parallels between the average life of a person living in Mexico under extreme conditions. And I see it now. We are being overworked to a point where we can't think of another alternative. And so I just want to encourage people to try to think outside of the box, do things that are different, because it'll change the way you think about solutions. And I personally find a lot of strength in puppetry. If I can build something out of paper mache and cardboard, then I can build new paths, new ways of coming together. And so I just want to let people know that the power is in their hands. We just need to practice coming together and building bigger solutions together, not singular solutions, big societal solutions. That's what I would say.
Rocio, I want to thank you for coming on. That's Rocio Chio Cabrera. And can you give us a way that people can contact you or your website?
Yes. Thank you so much. My website is www.chio, CHIO Cabrera, CABRERA.com. And I also post a lot of my daily artwork updates on my Instagram, which is @Chio Cabrera, Coz, with a COZ at the end.
Well, it's really nice seeing you again. I'm glad you reminded me that we had met before. And do you have an opening date for the Free Street Theater production of your current project?
Yes, our opening date is on July 26th. I'm so sorry for that hesitation.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's July 26th. But I've been looking at paper mache a lot, and I haven't internalized.
Well, people can find it if they look up Free Street Theater. And I want to thank you once again for coming on, and I will see you soon. And I want to thank you for working. I know that my granddaughter, Ida Rocket, has been working on these puppets too. So I'm going to come see the play.
Thank you so much.
Luego y buena suerte. And everybody else, stay tuned here on the left end of your dial. We'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland. We're going to talk with someone who opened a bookstore on the far south side. Welcome back, all you citizens of the world. It's time for the second half of the Live from the Heartland show for the week of May 23rd. And earlier this spring, I went down to the historic neighborhood of Pullman, way far on the south side of Chicago, for a spring sale. And I had my books and my photos. And a number of people, turns out, knew me from the Heartland Cafe. And one of them was a guy that I think his last name is Mike Manika. We call him, I think he's called Pullman Mike. And he was totally surprised to see me, let me know that he used to be a patron of both the Heartland Cafe and the Red Line Tap. And he asked if he could introduce me to a couple of people who had a bookstore called Undercover Books. I said, sure. So Pullman Mike introduced me to Todd Zaruba and Lynn Bagley. And they are the two people that own this wonderful little bookstore called Undercover Books. And I had the honor of bringing my photos down there. They put them up in all these different corners of the bookstore. I really liked the presentation and how the pictures look on a dark green wall. And we had a really nice opening. There were a number of old friends showed up. Got to talk to a number of people who had been involved with the Innocence Project and had just gotten out of prison or had gotten out of prison, wrongfully incarcerated. And I was very impressed with this little bookstore, and I asked Todd if he would come on and be a guest. Well, I actually asked them both, but only one of them is showing up today. But we will have Lynn on sometime too. So with all that running of my mouth, how are you today, Todd?
I'm doing well, Michael. Thanks
for having me. What are you doing over there in the bookstore today?
The same thing I do most days. I just, when I'm not selling books to someone or helping people find books that they're looking for, most of what I do is just sit and read and enjoy the environment, that we built down here.
Well, that's good. Well, what did you guys do before you opened a bookstore? Because I know you were in Rogers Park.
Yeah, my wife, Lynn, my partner, she lived in Rogers Park when we were dating. So I actually never lived in Rogers Park myself. I was living in Bucktown at the time. We got together and decided we wanted to make a go of it together. And one of the things we talked about early on was kind of what we wanted to do with our lives and the idea of having a bookstore was something that we discussed really early on. I was working IT, managing infrastructure for an organization called Illinois Action for Children. which does good work helping people subsidize their childcare costs primarily. But I was doing the, sort of back end IT support, computers and, networking and all that sort of stuff. And we, that was a satisfying work, especially working for an organization that was just doing such great work like that. But, after a period of time, I felt like I wanted to do something else. And so we decided to move forward with this bookstore idea.
Well, what compelled you really to open a bookstore at a time, I assume, and first let me ask, how long has the bookstore been there?
We've been open about 2 years, but it's sort of been in the works for more than a decade. We, spent a lot of time looking for a location that was going to make sense for us. We had some requirements, kind of aesthetically what we were looking for. And we wanted to open a place, where there weren't many bookstores or really anything to speak of, to try to bring something to a community that might need it. So that was important to us. And it took a long time for us to find a building, that first of all, that we could afford, but also met our requirements of there's a certain aesthetic we wanted, and also to, open someplace in a place that it was going to be needed.
Well,
So
you opened a bookstore at a time, I think a number of bookstores were closing. And then,
Yeah.
the pandemic, I know I had always, my wife's name is Paige, and she's really a book person. And I know that she's going to love coming down to your place and seeing it. But we had long talked about a bookstore. We did sell books at the Heartland, but not to the level that you guys do. I mean, you have these rolling racks, and you have, an awful lot of books. How much of your bookstore is involved with just used books, and how much of it is rare books? And where do you get all these books from? And do you buy books? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So our shelves can handle about 10,000 books. And they are, as probably noticed when you were here, they are overstocked. I mean, we have books in every nook and cranny in the store, and the shelves are overloaded. And then we have an additional probably 20 or 25,000 books in an on-site storage. So, it's a lot because most of our titles are, they're unique. We do have a few copies of some books, but most of the books we have a single copy. So, we're talking probably 25,000 or more individual titles. We try to specialize in books that are out of print or maybe difficult to find, not necessarily rare, I guess, or antiquarian, certainly, although we do have a little bit of that stuff. Some of our rare books include just interesting titles like, we do have first edition, first printing copies of some stuff that's collectible, but we also have like books that are just odd, and the one book that comes to mind is we have a copy of Dead Man Walking, and it's signed by the author, Sister Pergine, but also by all of the stars from the movie, Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn, for instance.
Wow.
It's just a paperback copy of that book, which is, I don't know where it came from even, or how, how we ended up with it, but it's just, we have some unique things like that. But yeah, most of what we have is just, good stuff, like good both nonfiction and fiction. We got the whole gamut.
You both are politically oriented and progressive people. Well, we could go off of that, but I guess what I had wanted to ask is how much of your clientele are people that know about you and learn about you from other parts of the city, and how much of it is local people? And tell us a little bit about who's local, what your community is about.
Sure. So I would say it's a decent mix of, people who we are connected to through, just different community organizations or, friends or whatever. We have really good support by the community. The community is, Washington Heights, I think demographically is the most African American neighborhood in the city of Chicago. And so we have a pretty good African American following from the neighborhood, but we also, our store borders the Beverly neighborhood, and so we also got people from that side, and so it's a good mix of people. Used bookstores draw a certain kind of people, I think. And I love them. But people will seek a used bookstore out. We have people come in to the store who, just happen to be vacationing or something, and their thing is to go to used bookstores. So it's a wonderful group of customers that we've built. We have people that come in and buy books, maybe every week, which is crazy to me because I love used bookstores. I am not going to a used bookstore every week to buy books. So that's great. But then we have, people who are stopping once or twice a year, who I still consider good regular customers. And then we have, plenty of people who poke their head in just to see what it looks like in here. So.
Yeah, there's a lot to see in there. So a little bit more about the neighborhood and the politics. I noticed when I was there that there were most of the people who came had already been there before. And there were two gentlemen there who had both been in prison and had been brought out of prison by the Innocence Project, which your wife and partner in the store, Lynn Bagley, as I understand, is a private investigator in general. That's her work, and she works with the Innocence Project. How many of these kind of programs do you have that are of a political, progressive, social justice nature?
We do take advantage of my wife's position. She's the senior staff investigator at the Illinois Innocence Project, and so being in that role, she is also involved or knows people from several other organizations that do work to improve the criminal justice system, to improve the prison system in general, and also innocence work. So, and we open up our space, our store, for those groups to come and have events or even just meetings, or for these people just to come in and have a place to feel comfortable, to talk to each other and that's a big part of why we wanted to open the place is to have a safe place for people to come and talk and just feel comfortable, that may not have a lot of other options.
So you basically see having a bookstore as a community building vehicle.
Absolutely. That's probably our primary goal, I would say. The bookstore business, especially used bookstore business, is not a business you're going to make any money at, and that we knew that going in. That really is not the point. We opened a bookstore because we love books. We love the idea of having a space, where people can come and enjoy books and enjoy each other.
And I think I saw somewhere that you've had groups of high school kids come in. I think Percy Julian High School brought a bunch of people. What's that experience like, bringing kids into the bookstore? I'm sure most of them have never seen anything like that. Maybe they got to see a library, and we don't know if.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We do. I mean, we're in very close proximity to Julian High School. It's literally across the street. And so we do get quite a few of the students in. And it's interesting because a lot of times the students will come in to the store for the first time. And first of all, they're just sort of in awe that a place like this exists, I guess. They're just, they're not used to having something like this accessible to them, I think. And they'll ask questions like, are these books for sale or I think they're confused sometimes that it's more like a library. And in essence, it is, in that we absolutely encourage these students to while they're in the store, to pull a book off the shelf and sit and read and enjoy it while they're here. We certainly don't require anyone to purchase anything or we want these kids to discover books and what books are about and how important they are. So that's a big thing, and it's we're pleasantly surprised by the kids who come in and actually have a fondness for the store.
Well, Todd Zaruba, how did you, as someone who owns a bookstore now, develop an interest in books?
I was interested in reading pretty much as far back as I can remember. I always, I was, an athletic kid, but I always enjoyed reading. So I, was the nerdy athlete, I guess you might say. And, I when I went to college, that's where I really grew a fondness for used bookstores in particular, and sort of the aesthetic of used bookstores, and just the idea of looking at books that you might not be able to find anywhere else, especially at that time. Back in when I was in college in the 1980s, there was no internet you could go and buy a book on. So the used bookstores especially offered books that the only other place you might be able to find them would have been the library, and you could have your own copy of something was pretty special.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Nebraska. I was a farm boy. I went to the University of Nebraska and got an English degree and a theater degree. So.
Well, I'm glad to hear of Nebraska. I'm not a big fan of their current governor and their general direction, but my great grandfather was a state legislator in Nebraska, a horse farmer. Actually took the horses east to market and never came back. So my grandma, who was young then, went on a covered wagon back to central Illinois. But I've always had a fondness for Nebraska. And I know that the University of Nebraska has a pretty good press. They put out some books. My friend Dave Megacy, whose book Out of Their League, when he's another intellectual or nerdy athlete guy. When he quit pro football, he did a book for Ramparts Press called Out of Their League. And I know it was reprinted by University of Nebraska Press.
Yeah, no, it was a good school. I don't have any ill will toward the state, except for the politics are a little too conservative for me. But
right on. Okay, so do you buy books from people, and do you have people coming in trying to hustle their books? And I know my wife, when we needed money, sometimes she would sell off her massive collection of books.
Yeah, we don't actually buy books. It's really hard to for a business like us to do that. The margins are so slim that oftentimes the amount of money that we can offer people for their books, to me at least, would be insulting. To the people who are trying to sell their books. So we don't do that, but we do take book donations, and we get donated books probably at least a couple times a week. And then we source books through things like estate sales, library sales, thrift stores, yard sales, places like that. Lynn, my wife, is really really good about finding the hidden treasures at the estate sales and places like that. So, she'll buy a book that, for $1 or something, where the value might be $100 or more dollars. So that's pretty cool.
Is there a network of used bookstores? Are you in touch with other people? I'm thinking of up on Clark Street, there's Heirloom Books now. And there's a lot of stories around that. We had them on the show a long time ago. But what is your relationship with other booksellers?
We don't, we participate in the local, the independent bookstore crawl, for instance, which included, I think, over 50 stores in Chicago. And so we have some connection there. But because our location, there's not a lot of bookstores close to us. You kind of have to either go to like Hyde Park or Bridgeport, further north of us. There is one other bookstore down here, Bookies, which is a decent store, but it's primarily new books, so we don't really share a lot in common there either. But the independent bookstores do, I think, a good job of sort of cooperating with each other and coexisting, and the competition is really not a thing in the used bookstore world, I don't think. Which is great.
Oh, that's good. Well, I don't know. So the business side of things is always rough in the book business. And you've chose a neighborhood which is probably it's not an upscale neighborhood. I'm not sure of what the actual situation of Washington Heights is. But what are the advantages and disadvantages of being in a kind of an isolated location, for lack of a better word? Because it's wonderful. I've loved going to the way far south. I went to Pullman and seeing that neighborhood, and I had my longtime friend and business partner Katie Hogan with me, and she from Beverly, so she knew a little bit about that. But what's the scene in your neighborhood, and is it an advantage or disadvantage?
Well, I think from our perspective, it's an absolute advantage. When we decided to do this, and we purchased the building which we live in. We live upstairs from the bookstore, which is very convenient for getting to and from work.
Right on.
But the intention was not to make money at this. And so in owning the building and keeping our overhead costs really low, we don't have to sell a lot of books to be able to keep the lights on, and that's all we want to do to keep the place open. So, and we really want to serve a community that doesn't have something like this. Give them a place, that they can kind of call their own and embrace.
Well, let me ask you about some of the other events you maybe do. I know I had a photo show opening, and the photos will be up through middle, or we don't know when it's coming down. But I'm also coming back, so I'll let you tell our listeners and viewers about that, because I'm looking
absolutely.
forward to it.
So yeah, Mike will be back in the store on May 31st, Saturday, May 31st, from 4 to 8 p.m. And he's going to be doing some reading from his books and, telling us some stories and answering questions and signing books. So hopefully we'll get people out to participate in that. I think it's going to be a great event. Like you mentioned earlier, the event where we opened your photo exhibit was great. I think this will even be better. So we'll see. But yeah, we have all kinds of events in the store. We host live music in the store, usually just individual musicians, but sometimes like we have a jazz trio coming up who's played in the store before. They're going to be back in the latter part of July. I don't have the date yet, but that'll be posted on our calendar soon. We have poetry readings. We have, book signings. We have we host block clubs. We host book clubs. We what else we do? Play readings. We do have social media that we kind of try to keep people posted on. We have an email list we send out to, but other than that, is more like people come into the store and find out about the events there. So we probably could do a better job of marketing our stuff, but
website?
People find out about it.
You have a website?
We do. The website is ucbookschicago.com.
And let me ask you as a final question, do you have a favorite book and a favorite author?
I do. I mean, I have a lot of favorite books just because I love books, but I think my favorite book is a book called The Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. And I can't really explain to you why that's my favorite book. I just love it. Always have. And I think probably William Faulkner is my favorite overall author.
Well, we got a lot to talk about next time I see you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nebraska connection. And I want to thank you for coming on, Todd Zaruba. I really appreciate that. And I also want to thank our first guest who was on talking about puppets. That was Rocio Chio Cabrera. And I want to thank our engineer, Hal James. I want to thank our producers, Tom Clark, Katie Hogan, Lynn Orman. And last week we had Jeffrey Haas, who did a wonderful book called The Murder of Fred Hampton and is real active in all things political and progressive. We also had Tom Clark on. And coming up next week, I'm honored to say we're going to have Mud Morganfield. We've had two of his brothers, all three the sons of Muddy Waters, but Mud's coming on next week, along with Adam James doing a sports report. Our intro music was Kev Mo. Our out music is Chic Street Man. We encourage you all to do good in the world because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that Todd does, that Hal does, that Chio does. All power to the people. Over and out. See you next week. We want to thank you for watching the Live from the Heartland show. New episodes air every Friday beginning at 9 a.m. Central Time. Episodes air each following Thursday on CAN TV, 9 p.m. in Sweet Home Chicago on Channel 21 or streaming everywhere else at cantv.org. Audio episodes go live on WLUW each Saturday, 9 a.m. on the left end of your dial at 88.7 FM or streaming everywhere worldwide at WLUW.org. They're available on Apple and Spotify podcasts by looking up Live from the Heartland on either platform and are also broadcast on Lumpen Radio each Friday at 9 a.m. on 105.5 FM and streaming at lumpenradio.com. I'm Michael James, and I'm glad to have been your host. Until next time, remember, do good in the world because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we do together. All power to the people. Over and out.
Gone to limbo. Are you doing the best you can? Tell me, are you doing